Chapter 1. The Boy from Al-Auja. Saddam Hussein was born in 1937 in a tiny village called Al-Auja. This village was in the Iraqi desert near Tikrit. The land was dry and the people were poor. Life there was not easy. Many families struggled to find food and water. Saddam's father died before he was born. This left his mother, Suba, in great sadness. She was a young widow, raising her son alone. She had little money and no support. The loss of her husband made her life very difficult. For her, each day was a battle. When Saddam was still a baby, his mother remarried. His stepfather was a harsh man. He treated Saddam badly. The boy grew up feeling lonely and afraid. He spent his childhood with few friends. The only comfort he found was in his dreams. Saddam loved stories. He often listened to elders in the village telling tales of great leaders and warriors. These stories filled his heart with hope. He imagined himself as a hero who could rise above the hardships of life. As a child, Saddam did not attend school right away. Education was rare in Al-Auja. Most children worked to help their families. But Saddam was different. He had a strong desire to learn. He wanted to know more about the world beyond his village. When he was 10 years old, Saddam moved to Tikrit to live with his uncle, Khairallah Talfa. Khairallah was a nationalist and a man of strong beliefs. He taught Saddam about politics and the history of Iraq. Saddam looked up to him. His uncle became a father figure and an inspiration. In Tikrit, Saddam finally went to school. It was a new experience for him. At first, he struggled to keep up. Other children teased him because he came from a poor village. But Saddam was determined. He worked hard and began to improve. Saddam's time with his uncle shaped his thoughts. Khairallah often spoke about the pride of being Iraqi. He told young Saddam that Iraq could be a great nation again. These ideas planted a seed in Saddam's mind. He started to believe that he could be the one to make Iraq strong. As a teenager, Saddam saw the inequalities around him. The rich lived in grand houses, while the poor had nothing. This made him angry. He began to dream of a future where power was not just for a few. He wanted to bring change, but he did not yet know how. In his free time, Saddam loved to explore Tikrit. He walked through its narrow streets and watched the daily life of its people. He saw their struggles and their strength. He began to feel connected to the land and its history. The young boy was also deeply influenced by Iraq's turbulent past. The country had been under foreign control for many years. The British had ruled Iraq, and many Iraqis felt humiliated. Saddam listened to stories of resistance against colonizers. He admired those who fought for freedom. Saddam also learned about Iraq's leaders. Some were brave, but many were corrupt. This frustrated him. He thought Iraq needed a strong leader, someone who could unite the people. These thoughts stayed with him as he grew older. As Saddam entered his teenage years, he became more serious. He started to think about his future. The life of a farmer in Al-Auja was not enough for him. He wanted something bigger. He wanted to rise above his humble beginnings. His uncle encouraged him to take risks. He told Saddam that great men were not afraid to dream. Saddam listened closely. He began to believe that he was destined for something important. At the age of 16, Saddam made a bold decision. He left Tikrit and went to Baghdad, the capital city of Iraq. Baghdad was unlike anything he had seen before. It was crowded and noisy, full of markets, cars, and people from different backgrounds. Life in Baghdad was not easy for a poor teenager. Saddam struggled to find a place in this big city. He lived with relatives and worked small jobs to survive. But he kept his focus. He knew this was where he needed to be. Baghdad was also a place of ideas. The city was alive with political debates. People argued about the future of Iraq and the role of foreign powers. Young Saddam listened carefully. He wanted to understand these ideas and find his place in them. In Baghdad, Saddam joined a small school. He continued his education and began to read books about history and politics. He admired leaders who had risen from nothing. These stories gave him hope. During this time, Saddam saw how divided Iraq was. Different groups of people fought for power. There were Sunnis, Shias, and Kurds. Each had their own beliefs and goals. Saddam wondered how these groups could ever come together. Despite the challenges, Saddam never gave up. His early years were filled with struggle, but they shaped his determination. He learned to survive in a harsh world. He developed a belief in his own destiny. Looking back, Saddam's childhood was a time of pain and learning. He grew up without a father. He faced poverty and fear. But he also found strength in these difficulties. Each hardship pushed him closer to his dream of power. This young boy from Al-Auja would one day rise to rule Iraq, but his journey was just beginning. For now, he was a boy with big dreams and a long road ahead. Chapter 2. A Dangerous Path. Saddam Hussein grew up watching Iraq's political struggles. The country was unstable, and people were unhappy. Many dreamed of change. Young Saddam felt the same. He wanted to help shape Iraq's future. In the 1950s, Saddam heard about a group called the Ba'ath Party. This group had bold ideas. They wanted Iraq to be free from foreign influence. They spoke of Arab unity and national pride. Their vision excited Saddam. He believed they could bring Iraq strength and respect. Saddam joined the Ba'ath Party when he was still a young man. It was not an easy decision. The party was small, and its members were not safe. They were seen as a threat by the government. But Saddam admired their courage. He wanted to be part of their fight for change. The Ba'ath Party held secret meetings. Saddam attended these gatherings, often late at night. The members discussed politics and their plans for the future. They shared their dreams of a stronger Iraq. But they also knew the risks. Spies were everywhere. Saddam became more involved in the party's activities. He handed out leaflets and talked to people about their ideas. His passion grew. He wanted to play a bigger role. He wanted to prove himself to the leaders of the party. One of the Ba'ath Party's goals was to remove the government in power. They believed this was the only way to bring change, but this was dangerous work. The government was strong and had many supporters. In 1959, the Ba'ath Party planned a bold mission. They decided to assassinate Iraq's Prime Minister, Abd al-Karim Qasim. Saddam, just 22 years old, was chosen to help. He was nervous but determined. He saw this as his chance to make a difference. The plan was risky. Saddam and a group of Ba'athists prepared carefully. They waited for the right moment. When the day came, they attacked Qasim's convoy. Gunshots rang out. The air was filled with chaos. The assassination attempt failed. Qasim survived, but some of his men were killed. Saddam managed to escape, but the government was furious. They began a hunt for those responsible. Saddam knew he had to leave. He fled to Syria, traveling in secret. The journey was long and dangerous. Saddam disguised himself to avoid being caught. He moved at night and stayed hidden during the day. Each step was filled with fear. In Syria, Saddam found refuge with other Ba'ath members. He stayed there for a short time before moving to Egypt. In Cairo, he lived among exiles. These were people who, like him, had left Iraq to escape danger. Life in Egypt was safer, but it was not easy. Saddam missed his family and his homeland. He thought about Iraq every day. He followed news from home and waited for the right time to return. During his years in exile, Saddam studied law. He believed education was important for a future leader. He wanted to prepare himself for the challenges ahead. He also spent time reading about politics and history. While in Egypt, Saddam stayed in touch with the Ba'ath Party. He wrote letters and shared his ideas. He wanted to remain part of the movement. His loyalty to the party never wavered. Back in Iraq, the Ba'ath Party continued its fight. They gained more supporters and grew stronger. Saddam kept dreaming of the day he could return to join them. He believed that one day they would succeed. In 1963, the Ba'ath Party finally seized power in Iraq. They overthrew the government and took control. Saddam was thrilled. He saw this as a victory for their cause. He quickly returned to Iraq, ready to help build the new government. But the Ba'ath Party's rule did not last long. Internal conflicts and opposition weakened them. In just a few months, they lost power. Saddam was disappointed, but he did not give up. He continued to work for the party in secret. Saddam's early years in the Ba'ath Party were filled with danger and challenges. He risked his life for the cause. He faced exile, fear, and failure. But these experiences shaped him. They made him stronger and more determined. This young man from Tikrit had found his path. It was not an easy one, but it was one he believed in. Saddam's journey with the Ba'ath Party had just begun. He was ready for whatever came next. Chapter 3. The Road to Power. In 1963, the Ba'ath Party took control of Iraq for the first time. Saddam Hussein returned from exile, eager to be part of this new chapter. He saw an opportunity to build his future. The leaders of the party welcomed him. They remembered his loyalty and his role in their earlier struggle. Saddam was young, ambitious, and determined. He quickly earned the trust of the senior members. They admired his energy and his ability to make bold decisions. Over time, he was given important tasks. This was his chance to prove himself. However, the Ba'ath Party's rule did not last. Internal disagreements weakened them. In just a few months, they lost power, and Saddam went into hiding again. But he did not lose hope. He stayed in Iraq and continued working in secret for the party. For the next few years, Saddam worked quietly behind the scenes. He built connections and strengthened the party's base. He showed a talent for organizing and understanding people. This helped the Ba'ath Party prepare for its next move. In 1968, the Ba'ath Party returned to power. This time, they were stronger and more prepared. Saddam played a key role in the coup that brought them back. His loyalty and hard work were rewarded. He was given an important position in the government. Saddam became vice president of Iraq. This role gave him more influence. He began focusing on the country's security. He created systems to monitor threats to the government. This included building a network of intelligence agencies. Saddam believed that control was key to staying in power. As vice president, Saddam also focused on Iraq's economy. He wanted to improve the country's oil industry. Oil was Iraq's most valuable resource. Saddam negotiated deals that brought more money into the country. This increased his popularity among the people. Despite his growing power, Saddam was not yet the leader. Ahmed Hassan al-Bakr, an older and more experienced politician, was the president. Saddam worked closely with him, learning how to manage the government. But he also had his own ambitions. Saddam was careful. He never openly challenged al-Bakr. Instead, he built his influence slowly. He made allies in the government and the military. He gained the trust of powerful figures. Many saw him as a loyal supporter of the president. Behind the scenes, Saddam was preparing for the future. He knew that one day he could lead Iraq. He focused on strengthening his position. He made sure that those who opposed him were removed from power. In the 1970s, Saddam introduced new policies to win the support of ordinary Iraqis. He expanded education and health services. Schools and hospitals were built across the country. Many people admired him for these changes. Saddam also supported women's rights. He encouraged women to work and go to school. This was unusual for the time. These actions made him popular among young people and families. At the same time, Saddam was careful to control dissent. He knew there were still enemies who wanted to overthrow the Ba'ath Party. He made sure they could not act against him. His intelligence services became some of the most feared in the region. In 1979, President al-Bakr's health began to fail. He decided to step down. Saddam was ready to take his place. He had spent years preparing for this moment. He became the new president of Iraq. When Saddam took office, he spoke of hope. he promised to build a strong and united Iraq. He said he would make the country a leader in the Arab world. His speeches were full of confidence and ambition. Many people believed him. But Saddam's rise to power was not without cost. Soon after becoming president, he held a meeting with government officials. During the meeting, he accused some of them of plotting against him. The room was silent as he listed their names. One by one, those accused were removed. Many were executed. This event sent a clear message. Saddam would not tolerate betrayal. It was a moment of fear and power. It showed everyone that Saddam was in control. After this, Saddam's rule became more intense. He demanded loyalty from everyone around him. He worked tirelessly to secure his position. He wanted to be seen as a strong leader, both in Iraq and beyond. Saddam used propaganda to build his image. His face appeared on posters and in newspapers. Songs and poems praised his leadership. He wanted people to see him as the father of the nation. In the early years of his presidency, Saddam's popularity remained high. He invested in infrastructure, building roads, bridges, and factories. Iraq's economy grew thanks to oil revenues. Many people believed that the country was moving forward. However, not everyone supported Saddam. Some saw him as a dictator. They feared his methods and his growing power, but few dared to speak out. The consequences of opposing him were severe. Saddam's rise to power was a mix of ambition, strategy, and fear. He had worked for years to reach the top. Now, as president of Iraq, he was determined to stay there. His journey had been long and dangerous, but he was not finished. The road ahead would bring even greater challenges. Chapter 4: Fear and Control. When Saddam Hussein became president of Iraq in 1979, he quickly showed his strength. He wanted everyone to know he was in charge. His government was built on loyalty, and disloyalty was not forgiven. Those who opposed him disappeared. Saddam created a system of control that reached every corner of Iraq. He used secret police to monitor the people. These officers worked quietly, listening and watching. They reported anything that seemed suspicious. Even small acts of defiance were punished harshly. The fear was constant. People were careful about what they said, even at home. Neighbors, friends, and even family members could not always be trusted. No one knew who might report them. Speaking against Saddam could lead to arrest, torture, or worse. Saddam also controlled the military. He made sure it was loyal to him. Any officer who showed signs of disobedience was removed. Sometimes they were publicly executed to send a message. Saddam wanted absolute power, and he was willing to do anything to keep it. To strengthen his control, Saddam used propaganda. His image was everywhere, on posters, in newspapers, and on television. Children learned songs praising him in school. He was called a hero, a protector, and even a savior. These messages were designed to make people believe he was the only one who could lead Iraq. At the same time, Saddam started ambitious projects to showcase his power. He ordered the construction of enormous buildings, grand palaces, and impressive monuments. These structures symbolized strength and pride. Saddam wanted the world to see Iraq as a powerful nation, One of his most famous projects was the rebuilding of ancient Babylon. He had bricks stamped with his name, just like the old kings of Mesopotamia. Saddam saw himself as part of Iraq's glorious history. He wanted his legacy to last forever. While these projects impressed some, they came at a cost. The money used to build palaces and monuments could have helped Iraq's struggling people. Many lived in poverty, but few dared to complain. Saddam demanded loyalty, and questioning his decisions was dangerous. Saddam's rule was full of contradictions. On one hand, he invested in education, healthcare, and infrastructure. Schools and hospitals were built across the country. Roads, bridges, and factories were constructed. These improvements made life better for some Iraqis. On the other hand, his cruelty overshadowed these achievements. People who disagreed with him were labeled as enemies. The punishments were severe. Torture was common. Public executions were used to scare others into obedience. Saddam's actions were not limited to Iraq. He also tried to influence neighboring countries. He sent money and weapons to groups that supported his goals. He wanted to be seen as a leader in the Arab world. This made him both admired and feared by other nations. Saddam's control over Iraq was not just political, it was personal. He wanted loyalty from everyone, even his own family. When he suspected betrayal from within, he acted quickly. Family members who crossed him were not spared. To maintain his grip on power, Saddam created laws that gave him total authority. He controlled the courts and the police. He decided who was guilty and who was innocent. The idea of justice in Iraq became tied to his will. People lived under constant surveillance. Conversations were monitored. Letters were opened. Telephones were tapped. The feeling of being watched never went away. It made Iraqis cautious and careful. Saddam's regime relied on creating enemies. He often accused groups of plotting against the government. These accusations justified his actions. Sometimes, entire villages were destroyed to eliminate his enemies. The people were left in fear of what might happen next. Despite the fear, Saddam still had supporters. Some believed he was protecting Iraq. Others admired his vision for a strong and independent nation. His charisma and confidence won them over. But for many, his rule brought only suffering. Saddam's control extended into every part of life. He decided what people could read, watch, and say. Books, films, and newspapers had to support his image. Anything that criticized him was banned. Creativity was limited to what served the state. One of Saddam's most infamous tools was the use of chemical weapons. In the 1980s, he ordered attacks on Kurdish villages in northern Iraq. Thousands of innocent people, including women and children, were killed. The world condemned these actions, but Saddam continued. The use of fear kept Saddam in power. People obeyed because they had no choice. Even those who disagreed with him stayed silent. The risk of speaking out was too great. Families were torn apart by arrests and disappearances. Saddam used rewards as well as punishment to control Iraq. Loyal followers were given money, jobs, and power. This created a group of people who depended on him for their success. They helped him maintain his rule. Under Saddam, Iraq became isolated. Many countries criticized his actions and refused to trade with Iraq. This hurt the economy and made life harder for ordinary people. But Saddam continued to focus on his vision of a strong Iraq, no matter the cost. Throughout his rule, Saddam showed no mercy to those who opposed him. His enemies were often humiliated before being punished. Trials were staged to show the world that justice was being served, but the outcomes were already decided. Saddam's control over Iraq was unmatched. He built a system where no one could challenge him. Every decision, big or small, had to go through him. This made him both feared and powerful. For 2 decades, Saddam ruled Iraq with an iron grip. His policies shaped the country, but his methods left deep scars. People learned to live with fear. It became part of their daily lives. This was Saddam's Iraq, a land of grand projects and quiet suffering. The people waited, uncertain of what the future would bring. Chapter 5: The Iran-Iraq War. In September 1980, Saddam Hussein made a bold decision. He sent Iraqi forces across the border into Iran. He believed it would be a quick victory. Saddam thought Iraq's army was stronger and better prepared. But things did not go as he expected. The war began with airstrikes. Iraqi planes bombed Iranian cities and military bases. Saddam hoped these attacks would weaken Iran quickly. He also sent troops into disputed border areas. His goal was to claim the land and show his strength. At first, Iraq made progress. The army captured some territory, and Saddam declared it a success. He appeared on television, confident and proud. He told the Iraqi people that victory was near, but Iran was not ready to give up. Iran fought back fiercely. Its forces were determined to protect their country. The war quickly turned into a bloody conflict. Both sides suffered heavy losses. Soldiers fought in trenches, facing harsh conditions. The fighting was brutal and relentless. Months turned into years, and the war continued. Cities near the border were destroyed. Families fled their homes, seeking safety in other areas. Refugees filled camps, living in difficult conditions. For many, life became a daily struggle for survival. Saddam used Iraq's oil wealth to fund the war. He bought weapons and equipment from other countries. He believed Iraq could outlast Iran. But the cost was enormous. Iraq's economy began to suffer. Basic goods became scarce, and the people felt the burden. The Iranian army also faced challenges. It lacked advanced weapons and resources, but Iran used sheer numbers to fight back. Young men and boys were sent to the front lines. Many were untrained and poorly equipped. The loss of life was devastating. Saddam used chemical weapons during the war. This was a shocking and brutal decision. Poison gas was deployed against Iranian soldiers and even civilians. The world condemned these actions, but Saddam continued. He believed it was necessary to win. The war spread beyond the battlefield. Both countries attacked each other's oil facilities. Tankers in the Persian Gulf were targeted, threatening global trade. The conflict began to affect nations far from the region. Inside Iraq, life became harder. The government demanded more from its people. Men were sent to fight, leaving families behind. Food and fuel were rationed. Schools and hospitals struggled to operate. The once growing economy was now in crisis. Despite the suffering, Saddam refused to back down. He continued to promise victory. His speeches were full of confidence. He wanted Iraqis to believe that their sacrifices were for a greater cause, but many began to doubt him. Iran also faced internal struggles. Its government used the war to strengthen its control. Dissent was silenced, and opposition groups were crushed. The war became a tool for political power in both countries. By the mid-1980s, the fighting had reached a stalemate. Neither side could gain a clear advantage. The front lines barely moved, despite countless battles. Soldiers and civilians were exhausted. The war seemed endless. In 1988, after 8 long years, the conflict finally ended. A ceasefire was declared. Both countries agreed to stop fighting. There was no clear winner. The borders remained the same as before the war. The cost of the war was enormous. Over 1 million people had died. Many were civilians caught in the crossfire. Cities lay in ruins. Entire communities had been wiped out. The damage to Iraq and Iran was unimaginable. For Iraq, the war left deep scars. The economy was in ruins. Saddam had borrowed heavily to fund the conflict. Now, the country was in debt. The people were tired and angry. Many questioned why the war had been fought at all. Saddam, however, presented the war as a victory. He claimed that Iraq had defended its honor and its people. He built monuments to celebrate the soldiers who had died. But behind the celebrations, Iraq was struggling to recover. The war also changed Saddam. He became more paranoid. He believed enemies were everywhere, both inside and outside Iraq. He tightened his grip on power, using fear to maintain control. For the people of Iraq, the end of the war brought little relief. The challenges they faced were far from over. Rebuilding would take years, and trust in Saddam's leadership was beginning to fade. This conflict shaped the future of both Iraq and Iran. It showed the world the dangers of unchecked ambition and the high cost of war. For those who lived through it, the memories would never fade. The Iran-Iraq War was one of the longest and bloodiest conflicts of the 20th century. It left a legacy of pain and loss, but it also showed the strength and resilience of ordinary people. They survived in the face of unimaginable hardship. Saddam's decision to start the war changed Iraq forever. It marked the beginning of a new and darker chapter in his rule. The lessons of this war would be felt for generations. Before we begin Chapter 6, a quick note for our listeners. You're currently listening to this audiobook on Woo English. Remember, this content is specially made for Woo English listeners only. If you're hearing it on any other channel, it may be a violation of Woo English's rights. Please ensure you're tuned in to the right source to fully enjoy and respect this audiobook journey. Now, let's continue the story. Chapter 6. The Gulf War begins. In August 1990, Saddam Hussein made a bold and controversial decision. He ordered the Iraqi army to invade Kuwait, a small but wealthy neighboring country. Saddam claimed that Kuwait had stolen oil from Iraq and accused them of flooding the market with cheap oil. These actions, he said, were hurting Iraq's economy. Kuwait was a small nation, but its wealth was vast. It had rich oil reserves and a strong position in the global economy. Saddam believed that by taking control of Kuwait, Iraq could solve its financial problems. He also thought it would make Iraq a stronger power in the region. The invasion was swift. In just 2 days, Iraqi forces occupied Kuwait. They overwhelmed the small Kuwaiti army and declared victory. Saddam announced that Kuwait was now part of Iraq. He claimed it as Iraq's 19th province. The world reacted with shock. Leaders from many countries condemned Saddam's actions. They saw the invasion as a threat to global stability. Kuwait's allies, including the United States, demanded that Iraq withdraw its troops. Saddam refused. Saddam believed the world would not act against him. He thought his position was strong. Iraq had one of the largest armies in the Middle East. Saddam expected other Arab nations to support him, but his confidence was misplaced. The United Nations responded quickly. They imposed economic sanctions on Iraq. Trade was restricted, and Iraq's economy began to suffer. These measures were meant to pressure Saddam to leave Kuwait, but he remained defiant. Tensions rose as months passed. The U.S. and other nations formed a coalition to oppose Iraq. This coalition included countries from around the world. They prepared for military action if Saddam did not withdraw. Saddam tried to rally support in the Arab world. He spoke of uniting the region against Western powers. He framed the conflict as a fight for Arab independence, but many Arab countries, including Saudi Arabia and Egypt, joined the coalition against Iraq. In January 1991, after months of failed negotiations, the coalition launched Operation Desert Storm. This was a massive military campaign to drive Iraqi forces out of Kuwait. It began with airstrikes. Coalition planes bombed Iraqi positions, military bases, and infrastructure. The bombing campaign was devastating. Iraq's air defenses were quickly destroyed. Iraqi soldiers in Kuwait were cut off from supplies. The coalition's advanced technology overwhelmed Iraq's forces. Saddam's army struggled to respond. After weeks of airstrikes, the coalition launched a ground offensive. In just 4 days, they defeated the Iraqi forces in Kuwait. The speed of their victory surprised the world. Saddam's army retreated in chaos. Many soldiers surrendered. As they retreated, Iraqi troops set fire to Kuwait's oil wells. The sky turned black with smoke. The fires burned for months, causing environmental damage. This act shocked the world and symbolized the destruction caused by the war. The Gulf War was over quickly, but its impact on Iraq was immense. The coalition had not invaded Baghdad, so Saddam remained in power. However, Iraq's military was severely weakened. Thousands of soldiers had died, and much of Iraq's equipment was destroyed. The economic sanctions remained in place after the war. These sanctions made life in Iraq extremely difficult. Food and medicine were hard to find. Many families struggled to survive. The people of Iraq paid a heavy price for Saddam's decisions. Saddam presented the war as a victory for Iraq. He claimed that his army had stood up to the world's most powerful nations. He used propaganda to rally support, but most Iraqis saw the truth. The war had brought only suffering and humiliation. The Gulf War also damaged Saddam's reputation abroad. He was seen as a threat to peace. Many countries viewed him as an unpredictable and dangerous leader. Iraq became more isolated on the world stage. At home, Saddam tightened his control. He crushed any signs of opposition. He used fear to maintain his power. Anyone who spoke out against him faced severe punishment. Saddam's grip on Iraq became even stronger after the war. The war left deep scars on the region. Kuwait began rebuilding, but the damage was immense. The fires in the oil fields took months to extinguish. The environmental and economic costs were enormous. For Iraq, the aftermath of the war was bleak. The sanctions continued to cripple the economy. Infrastructure damaged by coalition bombings was never fully repaired. The country struggled to recover. Saddam's invasion of Kuwait changed the Middle East forever. It showed the world the risks of unchecked ambition. The Gulf War was a warning of the consequences of conflict in a region so vital to global stability. Chapter 7. Life under Sanctions. After the Gulf War, Iraq faced harsh international sanctions. These were meant to weaken Saddam Hussein's government. The world wanted to punish him for invading Kuwait. Trade with Iraq was cut off. Essential supplies could not enter the country. At first, the impact was not clear, but as months passed, the effects of the sanctions grew worse. Factories stopped running because they couldn't get parts. Shops ran out of goods. Prices for everyday items became too high for most families. Hospitals struggled to help patients. Medicines were rare, and many treatments became impossible. Children suffered the most. Malnutrition spread across Iraq. Mothers and fathers watched helplessly as their children grew weaker. Food shortages became a daily problem. Farmers couldn't sell their crops. Imported food was no longer available. Bread lines grew longer. Families rationed what little they had. Hunger became a constant shadow over the country. Saddam Hussein blamed the sanctions for Iraq's suffering. He appeared on television accusing the United Nations and Western countries of cruelty. He said they were punishing innocent people. His speeches were filled with anger and defiance. But many Iraqis blamed Saddam. They saw how he used resources for himself. While the people starved, Saddam built grand palaces. These palaces were huge, filled with luxury. Gold decorations and marble floors showed the wealth that Saddam kept for himself. The contrast was stark. In the cities, families struggled to survive. Streets were filled with children begging for food. Schools lacked supplies. Electricity was unreliable, and clean water was hard to find. Meanwhile, Saddam's government lived in comfort. The sanctions created a black market. Smugglers brought goods into Iraq secretly. These items were expensive and only available to the rich. Ordinary people could not afford them. Corruption became widespread. Officials and powerful individuals used their positions to profit. Iraq's oil, its most valuable resource, could not be sold freely. This hurt the economy deeply. The government introduced a system of oil for food under the United Nations. Iraq could sell limited amounts of oil in exchange for food and medicine. But even this program faced corruption. Life in rural areas was even harder than in the cities. Farmers had no tools or fertilizer. Many abandoned their land. Villages became empty. People moved to urban areas, hoping to find work or aid. But the cities could not support them. In the midst of this crisis, Saddam used propaganda to maintain control. His face was still on posters. State-run media praised his leadership. They claimed he was defending Iraq against enemies. Some believed him, but many saw through the lies. Protests were rare, but resentment grew quietly. Speaking out against Saddam was dangerous. His secret police continued to monitor the people. Fear kept many silent, even as they suffered. Iraq's middle class disappeared during these years. Professionals like doctors, teachers, and engineers left the country. They sought better opportunities abroad. This brain drain made recovery even harder. Saddam used the sanctions to strengthen his grip on power. He distributed aid to those who were loyal to him. Communities that supported the government received food and supplies. Those who opposed him were left with nothing. The sanctions also affected Iraq's younger generation. Many children could not go to school. They had to work to help their families survive. A whole generation grew up knowing only hardship. Their dreams of a better future faded. Cultural life in Iraq suffered as well. Art, music, and literature became tools of propaganda. Creative voices were silenced. The focus shifted to survival, leaving little room for self-expression or innovation. Saddam's government continued its military spending despite the sanctions. Resources were directed toward rebuilding the army. This frustrated the people who saw their needs ignored. The international community debated the sanctions. Some argued they were necessary to pressure Saddam. Others believed they caused too much harm to ordinary Iraqis. Over time, the sanctions became a symbol of suffering and political failure. Despite the hardships, Iraqis found ways to survive. Families shared what they had with neighbors. Communities worked together to help the most vulnerable. Their resilience was a quiet act of defiance against both the sanctions and Saddam's regime. Stories of kindness emerged during these dark times. Teachers continued to educate children with no materials. Doctors worked with what little they had to save lives. These small acts of hope kept Iraq's spirit alive. The sanctions created deep divisions within Iraq. The gap between the rich and the poor widened. Some grew wealthy through corruption and smuggling. Others were pushed further into poverty. These inequalities left scars that would last for years. By the late 1990s, the situation in Iraq was desperate. The economy was in ruins. Infrastructure remained damaged from the Gulf War. The people were exhausted. But Saddam refused to change his policies. He clung to power, no matter the cost. International aid organizations tried to help. They brought food and medicine into Iraq, but their efforts were not enough. The needs of the people were too great. Many wondered how long Iraq could endure. Life under sanctions was a daily struggle. Families dreamed of peace and prosperity, but the future seemed bleak. The sanctions had brought suffering, but they had not weakened Saddam's hold on Iraq. Chapter 8. Enemies at Home. Saddam Hussein ruled Iraq with an iron fist, yet his power was constantly under threat. Many groups in Iraq opposed him. They believed his leadership was unfair and cruel. These tensions made Saddam's rule dangerous and unstable. The Kurds in northern Iraq had long sought independence. They wanted their own country. Their culture, language, and history were different from the rest of Iraq. Saddam saw their desire for freedom as a threat to his control. In the south, the Shia population also opposed Saddam. They felt ignored by his government, which favored the Sunni minority. The Shia communities wanted greater representation and rights. Their calls for change grew louder. Saddam responded with force. He believed violence was the only way to maintain power. His army launched brutal campaigns against these groups. Entire villages were destroyed. Families were forced to flee their homes. In the 1980s, Saddam used chemical weapons against the Kurds. One of the most horrific attacks was in the town of Halabja. Poison gas killed thousands of people, including women and children. The images of the victims shocked the world. The Kurds continued to resist, despite the risks. They formed militias to fight Saddam's forces. These fighters hid in the mountains, using guerrilla tactics. The battles were fierce, and the suffering on both sides was immense. In the south, Shia uprisings became more frequent. The largest rebellion came after the Gulf War. Shia communities, inspired by Saddam's defeat, rose against him. They hoped the world would support their cause. But the uprising was crushed. Saddam's forces attacked with tanks and helicopters. Towns and cities were left in ruins. Thousands of Shia civilians were killed. The survivors lived in fear, knowing any sign of rebellion could bring more violence. To maintain control, Saddam created a system of spies and informants. He wanted to know everything about his enemies. People were paid to report suspicious activity. Trust disappeared, even among neighbors and families. The government also used torture to silence dissent. Prisons were filled with political prisoners. Many were never seen again. Fear became a part of everyday life for those who opposed Saddam. Saddam built barriers between Iraq's communities. He used propaganda to divide the people. Sunnis were told that Kurds and Shias were enemies of the state. This strategy made it harder for groups to unite against him. Despite this, resistance never completely disappeared. The Kurds created autonomous zones in the north. These areas became a safe haven for those fleeing Saddam's violence. Shia groups also continued their fight in secret, waiting for the right moment to rise again. Saddam's actions drew criticism from around the world. Human rights organizations documented the suffering of Iraq's people. The United Nations condemned his use of chemical weapons and the massacres of civilians. But Saddam ignored these warnings. For many Iraqis, life under Saddam was a nightmare. Families lived in constant fear of being targeted. Children grew up surrounded by violence and loss. The scars of these years would last for generations. Saddam's enemies at home were not just limited to ethnic or religious groups. Even within his own government, there were those who plotted against him. He trusted no one. His paranoia grew as he eliminated rivals, often in public trials or executions. The effects of Saddam's rule were felt far beyond Iraq. His actions destabilized the region. Neighboring countries feared the consequences of his violence. Refugees poured across borders, seeking safety in foreign lands. Despite the repression, small acts of defiance continued. Some Kurds and Shias secretly organized schools and cultural programs. They refused to let their identities be erased. These quiet acts of resistance kept hope alive. Saddam believed his harsh methods were necessary. He thought they would secure his power. But they only deepened the divisions in Iraq. The country became more fractured, and the wounds grew deeper with each passing year. The violence against the Kurds and Shias created international outrage. Western countries debated how to respond. Some pushed for military action, others called for sanctions. But the suffering in Iraq continued. Saddam's fear of losing power led to greater cruelty. He viewed any opposition as a personal attack. His policies created a cycle of violence that trapped Iraq in conflict. The stories of those who resisted Saddam are both tragic and inspiring. Many lost their lives fighting for freedom, yet their courage inspired others to stand against tyranny. Life under Saddam's rule was filled with pain, but it also showed the resilience of Iraq's people. Despite the oppression, they continued to dream of a better future. Chapter 9. The Invasion of Iraq. In early 2003, the United States government made a bold claim. They accused Saddam Hussein of hiding weapons of mass destruction. These were dangerous weapons, capable of great harm. The U.S. said Saddam was a threat to the world. Saddam denied the accusations. He said Iraq had no such weapons. United Nations inspectors were sent to search for evidence. They visited sites across Iraq but found nothing. Still, the U.S. and its allies were not convinced. The situation grew tense. Talks and negotiations failed. The U.S., with support from Britain and other countries, decided to take action. They announced plans to remove Saddam Hussein from power. In March 2003, the invasion began. It was called Operation Iraqi Freedom. The world held its breath as coalition forces launched airstrikes on Baghdad. Explosions lit up the night sky. The sound of bombs echoed through the city. Iraq's army was unprepared for the attack. They had outdated weapons and low morale. Many soldiers abandoned their posts. Others surrendered without a fight. The coalition forces moved quickly, capturing key cities one by one. In just a few weeks, Saddam's government collapsed. His palaces and government buildings were looted. Statues of Saddam were pulled down by angry crowds. Images of these moments were broadcast around the world. Saddam disappeared. No one knew where he was. Some believed he had fled the country. Others thought he was hiding in Iraq. The U.S. offered a reward for information leading to his capture. The hunt for Saddam began. Meanwhile, chaos spread across Iraq. Without a government, the country fell into disorder. Looting and violence became common. Many Iraqis hoped for peace, but their lives were filled with uncertainty. The U.S. searched relentlessly for Saddam. Soldiers raided homes, questioned villagers, and followed leads. Months passed with no sign of him. It seemed he had vanished. The search was not easy. Saddam knew Iraq well. He had built secret tunnels and hideouts during his years in power. These places were difficult to find. His knowledge of the land gave him an advantage. For the Iraqi people, life grew harder. Basic services like water and electricity were disrupted. Schools and hospitals struggled to operate. The invasion had removed Saddam, but it had not brought stability. The world watched closely. Some supported the invasion, believing it was necessary. Others criticized it, saying it caused unnecessary suffering. The debate about the war continued in capitals across the globe. Then, in December 2003, the search ended. U.S. soldiers discovered Saddam hiding in a small hole near his hometown of Tikrit. He was weak, dirty, and alone. The once powerful leader looked defeated. News of his capture spread quickly. Many Iraqis celebrated. They hoped this would bring an end to their pain. But others feared what would happen next. Saddam's capture was only the beginning of a new chapter for Iraq. After his capture, Saddam was taken to a secure location. He was questioned by U.S. officials. They wanted to know more about his government and his plans. Saddam gave little information. He remained defiant, refusing to admit defeat. The world reacted to the news with mixed emotions. Some felt justice had been served. Others wondered if the invasion had been worth the cost. The debate over Iraq's future grew more intense. For Iraqis, Saddam's capture was a moment of change. Some saw it as the end of an era of fear. Others worried about the challenges ahead. Without Saddam, Iraq faced the difficult task of rebuilding. The invasion of Iraq left deep scars. Thousands of lives were lost during the fighting. Families were torn apart. Cities were left in ruins. The damage would take years to repair. Saddam's capture did not end the violence in Iraq. Insurgent groups began attacking coalition forces and civilians. The country fell into a cycle of conflict. Hopes for peace seemed distant. For Saddam, the invasion marked the fall of his regime. The man who once ruled Iraq with absolute power was now a prisoner. His story was no longer one of dominance, but of defeat. The invasion of Iraq was a turning point in modern history. It showed the world the risks of war and the fragility of power. It reminded everyone that even the strongest leaders can fall. Chapter 10. Captured. On a cold December evening in 2003, U.S. soldiers carried out a secret mission near Tikrit, Saddam Hussein's hometown. For months, they had been searching for him, following leads and questioning locals. The hunt had been long and difficult, but this time they had reliable information. The soldiers arrived at a farmhouse. It looked quiet and ordinary, surrounded by dry fields. They searched the property carefully. Suddenly, they found something unusual. Near the house, there was a small hole hidden under a pile of dirt and wood. They uncovered the hole and shone a flashlight inside. The soldiers saw a man crouching in the darkness. His face was thin, his beard messy, and his clothes dirty. It was Saddam Hussein. The once powerful leader was now hiding underground, alone and defeated. The soldiers pulled him out of the hole. He offered no resistance. He seemed tired and weak. In that moment, Saddam looked very different from the strong figure Iraqis had seen on posters and television for decades. The news spread quickly. Saddam Hussein, the man who had ruled Iraq with fear and power, was now a prisoner. For many Iraqis, it was hard to believe. They had lived under his rule for so long. Some celebrated in the streets, cheering and waving flags. For others, the capture brought mixed emotions. Even though they had suffered under Saddam, seeing him in such a state was difficult. The image of him being pulled from a hole, disheveled and quiet, was shocking. The world watched as more details about the capture were revealed. Saddam had been living in the hole for weeks. It was small and cramped, with just enough space for one person. Inside, he had a few supplies: water, a flashlight, and a few personal items. Saddam was taken to a secure location for questioning. U.S. officials wanted to learn about his government and his plans. But Saddam gave little information. He remained defiant, refusing to admit his mistakes. For Iraqis, the capture marked the end of an era. Some saw it as a victory. They felt justice was finally being served. Others saw it as a moment of reflection. They thought about the years of suffering under Saddam's rule and the uncertain future ahead. Saddam's capture was a deeply symbolic moment. The man who had once controlled an entire nation now sat in a cell, waiting for his fate. It showed how quickly power could disappear, how even the strongest leaders could fall. In the days following his capture, Saddam's photographs were shown around the world. One image stood out: a medic checking his hair and mouth for lice. This picture became a symbol of his downfall. It was hard to imagine that this was the same man who had built grand palaces and ruled with an iron fist. The capture also brought new challenges for Iraq. Saddam's supporters, though smaller in number, were still active. They viewed his capture as a humiliation. They used it as a reason to continue fighting against coalition forces. In the cities, many Iraqis hoped the capture would bring peace. They wanted an end to the violence and chaos that had followed the U.S. invasion. But life remained difficult. Bombings and attacks continued, making daily life dangerous. For the U.S. and its allies, capturing Saddam was a major achievement. It showed their determination to find him, no matter how long it took. But they knew the mission was far from over. Rebuilding Iraq would take time and effort. Saddam's capture also raised questions about what would happen next. Many Iraqis demanded a trial. They wanted him to face justice for the crimes committed during his rule. The world debated how to handle his case. In the months after his capture, Saddam remained defiant. He refused to cooperate with his captors. He claimed he was still the rightful leader of Iraq. These statements surprised no one. Saddam had always been proud and stubborn. The capture of Saddam Hussein was a moment of hope for some and fear for others. It marked the end of his physical freedom, but not the end of his influence. Iraq was still a divided nation, struggling to heal from years of dictatorship and war. Chapter 11: A Trial and a Sentence. In 2004, Saddam Hussein faced his most significant challenge. He was brought to trial for crimes committed during his rule. The courtroom was packed with lawyers, judges, and reporters. Cameras recorded every moment, and the world watched closely. The charges against Saddam were serious. He was accused of crimes against humanity, including the mass killing of Kurds and Shias. The evidence was overwhelming. Survivors of his regime told their stories in court. Their words painted a picture of suffering and loss. Saddam, dressed in a dark suit, appeared calm. He stood tall, refusing to show weakness. He spoke loudly, defending himself and questioning the court's legitimacy. He claimed the trial was unfair, a tool of his enemies. For many Iraqis, seeing Saddam in court was surreal. He had once been untouchable, ruling with absolute power. Now he sat in a courtroom, surrounded by guards. His fall from grace was complete. The trial lasted months. Witnesses described horrific events. Families shared how they had lost loved ones. Many in the courtroom cried as they listened. The pain of the past was brought to the surface. Saddam showed no remorse. He called the court a puppet of foreign powers. He declared himself the true leader of Iraq. His confidence angered some and saddened others. It was clear he would never admit guilt. The judges faced immense pressure. They knew the trial was historic. Their decision would shape Iraq's future. It was not just about Saddam. It was about justice for the Iraqi people. Outside the courtroom, opinions were divided. Some Iraqis believed the trial was necessary. They wanted justice for decades of suffering. Others felt conflicted. Saddam had brought pain, but he had also brought stability. The trial highlighted the divisions in Iraq. Kurds and Shias called for a harsh sentence. They remembered the atrocities committed against their communities. Sunnis, on the other hand, saw the trial as a humiliation. They felt targeted and marginalized. As the trial continued, the evidence mounted. Documents and testimonies revealed the extent of Saddam's actions. His regime had used fear and violence to control the country. The stories of torture and mass graves were undeniable. In November 2006, the court reached a decision. Saddam Hussein was found guilty of crimes against humanity. The verdict was clear. He would be sentenced to death by hanging. The announcement sparked strong reactions. In some parts of Iraq, people celebrated. They danced in the streets, feeling that justice had been served. In other areas, the mood was somber. The sentence marked the end of an era, and for some, it felt like the loss of a leader. Saddam listened to the verdict without emotion. He remained defiant, refusing to acknowledge the court's authority. He called his execution a political act, not justice. His words were defiant until the end. The sentence was carried out on December 30th, 2006. It was early in the morning, just before the start of Eid al-Adha, an important Muslim holiday. The timing was controversial, adding to the tensions in Iraq. Saddam's final moments were captured on video. He appeared calm as he faced his executioners. He exchanged words with the guards, maintaining his composure. The video was later leaked, sparking outrage and debate. For many Iraqis, the execution brought closure. They felt it was a step toward healing the wounds of the past. But for others, it deepened the divisions in the country. The cycle of violence and revenge seemed far from over. The trial and execution of Saddam Hussein were defining moments in Iraq's history. They symbolized the end of a brutal regime, but they also highlighted the challenges of building a united and peaceful nation. Saddam's legacy remained a subject of debate. Some remembered him as a tyrant who ruled with fear. Others saw him as a leader who had stood up to foreign powers. The trial did not erase these conflicting views. For Iraq, the trial was a turning point. It was an opportunity to confront the past and seek justice, but it also exposed the divisions that still haunted the country. The story of Saddam's trial is a reminder of the power of justice. It shows how even the most powerful leaders can be held accountable. But it also reveals the complexities of healing a nation after years of dictatorship and war. Chapter 12. A Divided Legacy. Saddam Hussein's execution in 2006 marked the end of an era. For over 2 decades, he had ruled Iraq with absolute power. His death brought mixed feelings. Some celebrated, while others mourned. His legacy remains one of the most debated in modern history. To many, Saddam was a ruthless dictator. His rule was built on fear and violence. Thousands were imprisoned, tortured, or killed during his time in power. Entire communities suffered under his policies. The memories of chemical attacks and mass graves still haunt Iraq. For others, he was a symbol of strength. They saw him as a leader who stood firm against foreign interference. He dreamed of making Iraq a powerful nation. Some admired his ability to keep the country united, even through war and hardship. Saddam's ambitions came at a high cost. His wars with Iran and Kuwait devastated Iraq. Lives were lost, cities were destroyed, and the economy collapsed. Ordinary people paid the price for his decisions. Families struggled to survive as sanctions and conflict tore the country apart. Despite the suffering, Saddam built an image of himself as a hero. He used propaganda to present himself as the father of Iraq. His face was everywhere, on posters, statues, and coins. Schools taught children to honor him. For years, his name was spoken with both fear and reverence. Saddam's downfall revealed the fragility of his power. When the U.S.-led coalition invaded Iraq in 2003, his army crumbled quickly. The government he had controlled so tightly disappeared. The chaos that followed exposed the cracks in his regime. His trial and execution brought justice for many Iraqis. Victims of his rule finally saw him held accountable. But his death also deepened divisions in the country. Some viewed it as a necessary step toward rebuilding. Others saw it as a loss of a leader who had defended Iraq's sovereignty. Saddam's legacy is tied to the suffering of specific groups. The Kurds in the north will never forget the gas attacks on their villages. The Shias in the south remember the massacres that silenced their uprisings. These events define how many Iraqis see him today. Yet, there are those who remember him differently. Some Sunnis see him as a protector of their community. They argue that under Saddam, Iraq was strong and respected. For these individuals, his death felt like the end of stability in their lives. Iraq after. Saddam faced enormous challenges. The country struggled to rebuild. Violence and division became daily realities. Insurgent groups grew in power, filling the void left by his regime. For many Iraqis, life did not improve after his fall. The world's view of Saddam is just as divided. Some nations saw him as a tyrant who needed to be removed. Others saw him as a leader who resisted Western domination. These perspectives continue to shape global debates about his rule. Saddam's life is a story of contradictions. He built grand palaces while his people went hungry. He invested in education and healthcare, yet used these achievements to strengthen his control. He spoke of unity, but ruled by dividing the country. His story is also one of ambition. From humble beginnings in a small village, he rose to the highest position in Iraq. He dreamed of greatness for himself and for his country, but his methods ensured that his vision would come at a heavy cost. For many, Saddam represents the dangers of unchecked power. His ability to dominate a nation shows what can happen when fear becomes a tool of governance. His fall is a reminder that even the strongest rulers cannot escape accountability. For others, his story is one of resilience. Despite sanctions, invasions, and uprisings, he held onto power for decades. His leadership style was brutal, but his determination to stay in control was unmatched. Saddam's death did not end his influence. The divisions he created still affect Iraq today. His policies left deep scars on the country's communities. Rebuilding trust among Iraq's people remains one of the nation's greatest challenges. His execution also raised questions about justice. Was his trial fair? Did it heal the wounds of his rule, or did it create new ones? These questions continue to be debated by historians, politicians, and ordinary people. The monuments Saddam built are now symbols of his complex legacy. Some have been destroyed, seen as reminders of oppression. Others remain, viewed as part of Iraq's history. They stand as silent witnesses to a turbulent past. Saddam's story is also a lesson for future leaders. It shows how power can corrupt and how ambition can blind. It is a reminder of the responsibility that comes with leadership. For Iraq, moving forward means remembering the past, but not being defined by it. Saddam's legacy is part of the country's story, but it is not the whole story. Iraq's people continue to write their own future, one step at a time. Saddam Hussein's life was a mix of triumph and tragedy. His rule changed Iraq forever, leaving a legacy of power, fear, and loss. His name remains controversial, evoking strong emotions even years after his death. This chapter in Iraq's history reminds us of the importance of justice, the cost of ambition, and the strength of a nation's people. It is a story that will not be forgotten.